¿Qué hora, Coto? Buenas tardes and welcome to the final day of our favorite week of the year, Privacy Week. Ko Laura Rodriguez Tokuingwo. I would like to introduce myself. I am currently a Senior Compliance Officer at the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. I have previously worked as a privacy officer in the public sector, and I'm also completing a PhD in law on children's privacy at Victoria University. Just a quick but really, really important disclaimer. I'm here today not in my official OPC capacity, but as a privacy professional, and I will be sharing my own views and experiences with you today. With that, we want to thank a big thank you to the OPC for opening the space for Marcin and I to be here with you today. And I will hand over to Dr. Marcin Bedkier to introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Laura. Koto, welcome. Dzień dobry. Thank you very much for coming to this session today. I see the numbers are like 240 people, and it's wonderful that you're allowing us to give you some insight on privacy officers' role. My name is Marcin. I have a computer science and legal background. Well, we've been living in New Zealand for more than 2 years now, serving New Zealanders as a university lecturer at Victoria's Law School, as a founding member and chair, also 2 times chair of Privacy Foundation New Zealand. I was also a public servant. All those activities are around IT law or privacy. Probably that's enough about me. I hand over back to Laura to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcin. Today's session is about the role of the privacy officer, and more specifically, how you can get ahead of privacy risks before they become incidents. So what we are offering today is a slightly different lens on the role. Marcin and I created this webinar as an invitation to think about the privacy officer and the privacy function, not just as a compliance checker, but as a strategic risks professional, someone who supports privacy across the entire life cycle of information. And if you are a privacy officer, I bet you can relate and you have likely lived this. You get an email from someone in the business. Hey, we have procured a new tool, a new software. Potentially, it handles personal information. Do we need a privacy impact assessment? Oh, and by the way, we have been using it for a year already. So this is kind of a retroactive exercise. At that point, the project is already live or going live next week, and you have no chance to do a proper risk assessment. Here is another classic one. The Friday afternoon incident call. I don't know why it's always Friday afternoon. And then the call goes along the lines of, we think we had a privacy breach. It happened a few months ago, but now someone is complaining. What should we do? By that stage, harm may already be done, and you have no time to contain it, assess risk, let alone notify people or notify the OPC. These reactive patterns happen everywhere across big and small agencies alike. And that's why we are here today, Marcin and I. We want to shift the mindset. We want to stop reacting and start getting ahead of the risk, like the title says. Great. So let's start with a metaphor Marcin and I really like. As a privacy officer, you can think of yourself as a builder, someone responsible for building a house in a place where storms are expected. The house, that structure, is your privacy function. And then you have a foundation, and that's your governance, your risk assessments, your policies. They are solid, they are reliable, but they are also built to last. But because you're a good builder, a good privacy officer, you also know it's no matter of this if the storm comes. It's when. So you prepare, you have an emergency plan, you got supplies, a safe basement, and that emergency plan, that's what we are calling today your privacy breach management framework. And it's not a reactive exercise, it's part of the preparation, part of the job of being a privacy officer. Before we get into our presentation, let's take a quick look at what the Privacy Act 2020 says about the role of the privacy officer. Under Section 201, every agency covered by the Act must appoint at least one privacy officer. How many you need? Well, that depends on the size and structure of your agency. If you are a sole trader, that will be you. You can, of course, outsource this role. Now, if you're a mid-sized agency, it might be your manager, your CE, or someone wearing multiple hats. In large organizations, there might be a whole team of privacy officers. And that makes sense because the more personal information you handle, the more capacity you will need to manage privacy risks. But the key point is simple. Every agency must have someone in the role. Now, let's unpack these 4 duties in detail, the ones that you see in my slide. We had plenty of great presentations already this week that went through all of these functions. But just to ground us, the Act sets out 4 key functions. The first one, encouraging compliance with the information privacy principles. And of course, this is about the 13 principles we know already, IPPs, from collection to disposal. And as we will see during this session, it's not just about knowing the principles. Of course, it's about applying them in practice. And this is where things like privacy by design come in play. And Marcin will touch on that shortly. Dealing with requests under the Privacy Act. Well, typically, these are access and correction requests, your IPP6 and IPP7, people asking for their own personal information, working with the Privacy Commissioner on investigation, and the last one, ensuring the agency complies with the provisions of the Act. This one sounds simple, but is broad. It includes everything from managing requests, complaints, and of course, privacy breaches under Part 6, and we will go into that later. You will hear me circle back to this last function. And the most important thing is, this is just not about a tick box exercise, it's about preventing harm and protecting people behind the personal information. Let's look at our agenda for a minute. And going back to the house metaphor, the privacy officer is the builder. So your job is to strengthen your privacy function. And to do that, you wear 2 hats. One, as a strategist, as you can see in the slide, and the other one as a responder. In the strategist role, you are doing things like data and risk mapping, privacy risk assessments, and threat modeling. And Marcin will walk you through that in a minute. Then I will take over to talk about the responder role and what it takes to be ready for when things go wrong. But again, I'm not talking from a reactive perspective, I'm talking about preparation. And that includes building your privacy breach management framework, meeting your Part 6 breach notification obligations, and doing proper incident review and prevention. we will keep it practical. We will share some tips, and I will hand over to Marcin to open with the privacy officer as a strategist.
Thank you very much, Laura. Let me just grab the screen. Hope you still see it. And yes, as Laura mentioned, we'll be covering those two sides of privacy officers' work, the strategist and the responder, because they actually really support one another. Simply, well, proactively recognizing the risks and modeling threats allows us to prevent and prepare for a privacy breach. And also, an experience in privacy breach management verifies and challenges our ideas about what are the risks, because the risk actually eventuated. So we can draw some insight of that. So this is both complementary. So let's talk about risk assessment. Regardless of whether we are just organizing things from the scratch or in a new organization, or we are taking over a job or a project with an established organization with some privacy management history, risk management should be our first strategic choice. This is the foundation of that house. We need to see the risks to manage them. Seeing the risks enable us to know where to start, what to monitor, how to measure performance of those activities, and finally to prepare for the incident. So we need to figure out where, in thinking about that house, where are our weak spots, whether there are roofs or walls, and where are the things which we need to be aware of. So the skill we should excel at is actually recognizing potential problems. We can call it as well a threat modeling, borrowing the expression from computer security language. So our question should be, what could go wrong? So spotting the potential problems, recognizing the weaknesses and potential threats leads to successful mitigation down the track. And so to recognize those, we need to cross two main areas of knowledge or expertise. So first is the understanding. We need to have an understanding or understand the organization's systems and processes, which are fueled by personal data. Basically, we need to know how the personal information flows through our organization, where it goes to be able to, and which system it is processed by. And the second thing is we need to understand privacy itself, whether it's legal or non-legal. It creates different sort of obligations and expectations of our clients, of the society as a whole as well. So knowing where the personal information is and what is privacy, what are the potential problems here, putting this all together enables us to identify potential problems, to ask the question, what can go wrong in that particular process or in that particular piece of information. And then knowing those scenarios, what can go wrong, we can think about the risks actually. So we can think about the particular impact, what could be the impact on individuals, on us, what's the likelihood of the risk and so on, and how to mitigate them down the track as well. So we can think about the risk management or risk mitigation. So a good way, well, just give you an example that, well, if we know that our organization has, for example, old customer relationship management software and it's clunky and operators are making notes in text editors while talking with their clients, with our clients, and that could, so knowing that how that personal data is actually used with the system and outside the system, how people actually use it, enables us to think about what can go wrong there. Yeah, that they, for example, may put a lot of notes into that attachment or text editor and send it, for example, somewhere. But that those things happened in New Zealand a number of times. And for example, we can think about particular measures to address that. Yeah, so training, particular training for those people who enable them or teach them how to prevent problems, even if they cannot really fully use that software. And of course, changing the software would be the first thing to do, but that might be off the table because of money and time and so on. And we can also think about some technical measures or things like pop-up asking to reconsider whether this, if you are sending that email, does it really have to have an attachment. So those are well, that's the path. Yeah. So the first thing let's talk about create that map of those of threats. A good way to create that such a map is to apply what I call the data-centric approach, but it comes from the observation that actually privacy risks are predominantly data risks. So it's the personal information stored in computer data that can be used, or on paper in the organization, that can be used in a way which creates harm to people. And also data privacy protection data protection legislation operates using the concept of personal data or information, and attaches obligations and rights to the use or to those personal information. So following the circulation of the data within the organization, knowing where the data is and how it flows, how it's collected, how it is secure, used in the organization, stored, and finally maybe shared and disposed or archived, gives us the overview of well, first step, what can go wrong. So we need a sort of so we need a sort of data map, which is sometimes called data inventory, that basically describes, well, all of the personal information which the organization uses, that across the full data cycle. It needs to include also third parties, so partners or agents who work with us or for us, because well, they operate on our data, and we might be legally responsible for what our agent or contractor is doing with our personal information. So that needs to be factored in, and we're creating some sort of data inventory or data map. We need to record also factors that will help us to determine risks and obligations, and importantly also help us to or facilitate to keep this map alive. So what are those factors? Well, data location or other factors that can determine the jurisdiction, for example. Source of data or purposes for which we have collected that data, because there are obligations on the organization. Usually the data privacy laws are related to the so-called purpose limitation specification, purpose specification and limitation or use limitation principle, which limits the use of personal information to that purpose of collection. Sometimes we have particular data from particular sources, and there are conditions attached how we can use them. So we need to know or be aware about this. Data sensitivity, which is very important, because it determines how much we should protect the data and how to react, for example, in the case of data breach, which will be covered by Laura. By the way, although we don't have defined special categories of personal information in our Privacy Act per se, information sensitivity is important, because we need to treat different sensitivity differently. It also for the data privacy breaches. The OPC defines sensitive data as data that may be used as prohibited grounds of discrimination according to our Section 21 of Human Rights Act. So sex, marital status, religious belief, race, ethnicity, disability, and so on. So that's the way of kind of distinguish what's more practical way of distinguish what's more sensitive. Sorry. So importantly, so-called business owners as well. So those are the people who are responsible for data or the systems, for those systems and personal information that is processed by those systems in the organization. So those are the people who are really responsible for particular pieces of infrastructure or processes, business processes. And we need to have those links, direct contacts to them, because that's the way we will be operating with them and through them. Now, word of advice here: we need to be careful to not overcomplicate that data inventory from the start, because I saw huge projects in which for privacy officer was carefully prepared, well, actually by himself, a set of questions, creating some sort of sophisticated forms that he just sent to all units of the organizations to gather as much information, as much knowledge as possible. And that's what had a low response rate, took a long time of going back and forth to collect actually at the end, because people didn't understand what they had to put it and put there. And finally, when it was created after a long time, it was already outdated. So don't do it alone, and don't do it this way. A smart way of doing this is to involve others. Talk to people, involve stakeholders. There are stakeholders that are crucial and who can help you with the existing information they're already using for their needs. So get in touch with IT because they will deal with information technology in the company. Security, information security people, because they have very similar risks. They need to protect any sort of information in data in the company or in the organization. And which includes personnel as well, for legal, finance, HR, and so on. Those people will gladly help you if they see that you can help them as well with their job. And that may be possible also to reuse their inventories and the data about the risk they already have, or about data about the information about what's happening. So talking with those people help you to understand the status quo quickly, and importantly, probably more importantly, even to forge relationships that will be crucial for you at work, and importantly also for them, because in case of privacy problems or breaches, they will come to you as well. So that's a both way street. It may be that you have a data governance or information governance function in your organization. That person should be your best friend, because her or his role is to know where are the different types of data in the company, in the organization, and how to make it available for use. But often, especially in the smaller organizations, that function is actually either governed in IT or even by the privacy team. Yes, some time savers here. Well, there is of course, you can say there's an app for that. There are some information management software tools that can help. Don't want to advertise there, but that's like Colibra or Microsoft Purview or Atlan or Elation. Those are the pieces of software that are actually able to catch different data dependencies in the company, and data, what is and how it's stored and so on, and also keep up with the dynamics of changes. But what they won't capture is those crucial interactions with people who are responsible for that, and knowledge how people work with the data in practice. So we will know that data is, for example, in customer relation management system, but we won't know that people don't or use it in particular way. So we need also to be in touch with people who are working there. Also, another thing here is to think not only about the snapshot of that, but also about the dynamic, how that changes. So how to implement future changes, what are the ongoing projects, what are the new privacy impact assessments, for example, or what I called environmental scanning. So the information which come to you as a privacy officer or to your team about changes in the company. So those are all the information which should trigger updating your inventory. And that can be, as I said, quite simple. Well, could be done in an Excel sheet even. Once we have that picture of how and where the data flows, we can start to talk about the threats and risks. So let's just briefly go through whose risks, or what sort of risks we have. We should approach from the point of view of the organization we are in. There might be many data processing problems or threats, if you prefer that language, that impact either individuals that are described in the data, so data subjects, or society, or both, and may impact even directly the organization. But at the end of the day, you need to see those problems, risks, through the impact of your organizations. For example, legal risks, legal problems. Well, if harm to the individual as a result of privacy breach, breach of privacy principle or privacy breach, creates risks of a legal action, for example. Risk to our reputation, for example, a product which even might be legal, but is not acceptable to the public, might put our reputation at risk. Well, often reputation risk comes with legal risk, but sometimes it's completely separate, because think, for example, Google Glasses. Like 10 years ago, they were released on the market, and people were not want to use it, and because they didn't like simply that someone was recording or could record them, so the interlocutor, the person who was speaking with, and they even created a name for the person who was using those glasses as glass hole. So it was something which was a legal project that was rejected by society as something creepy and maybe even unethical. So it's not only a legal problems you should have be aware of. Data problems can impact our operational activities. For example, data breach, or we can impact the systems, or people, or maybe privacy problems that change the people, the way people are interacting with us, which impact our operational activities. There may be strategic problems, or even only strategic problems. For example, if we recklessly use some privacy invasive technology, we may change the way that it's regulated. I think, I don't know, facial recognition technology, some large-scale deployment of facial recognition technology, which is legal in New Zealand. We can discuss whether it's ethical. Maybe yes, maybe no. But it may impact the way the regulator is thinking about this technology. May cause additional regulation, which will change we'll have to adjust our strategy on the market. So those are the typical risks from the perspective of companies. Of course, there might be different risks here and different split. But behind those risks are data processing problems that impact real people and cause real harm somehow to the people and to the society. They can have a different nature. That may be legal, ethical, that may be malfunction of IT systems, that may be even simple problems elevating the risks, like, I don't know, testing the systems on production data. Don't do it, by the way. So to assess those risks, yeah, we need to come up with a list of scenarios what could go wrong. So list of threats. And what could go wrong across the existing technology, or people who are working on the technologies and processes that are operating. We need to take a look, importantly, for the potential problems in depth also with our third parties and vendors. And we need to take a look also in the privacy response processes. So as Laura mentioned, access and correction requests, and also privacy breach management. Well, access and correction requests are bearing increased risk by definition, because in Privacy Act, they don't require to find the interference with privacy. They don't require further harm. It's enough that we don't respond to the privacy request, access request or correction request in particular way or in a specified time, usually 20 working days. And failure to do so is an interference with privacy, even without a harm. Yeah? And privacy breach responses are by definition high risk. Laura will tell you in a minute how to prepare for them. So how to do it well? Well, again, we need to involve stakeholders. Well, there are actually two ways of doing this exercise, which are probably both wrong, and then way in the middle. So either you do it alone, so you have the privacy knowledge, but you may miss the important aspects of you don't have the visibility of those systems and how people work with that. Or you can hand it over to frontline managers or those business owners or teams who are working with the data, but they don't have an idea or broader idea about the privacy problems. So I strongly advise to let those people do it, because they are responsible for the systems and processes, but help them do it as much as you can, because provide that crucial privacy knowledge, privacy expertise. Be smart here. Reuse the resources, web forms, typical risk description, risk catalogs. Find a way to leverage existing historical assessments in the company, old privacy impact assessments, and so on. One more thing here. What is important for that dynamic aspect of that is that think about the right metrics, because you're not just creating a snapshot of those risks. You're trying to create a snapshot and a way to provide assurance, monitoring of those risks, to report, to be sure where are we with those risks in time. So metrics, think about good metrics to create that idea of what's happening there at different parts of the organization. Metrics could go towards assessing the sensitivity of data, the impact, likelihood of risks, exposure, for example. Example metrics, they can be quite simple, actually. Anything which is as close to the particular risk as possible. It may be about the number of completed or non-completed data activities, volume of data request processes, volume of errors, which gives us the idea of how much it is the area is exposed. It may be type of data involved. It may be number of people with access to data, frequency of that access, number of complaints, things like that. Sometimes what depends really on the system and on the particular thing. Sometimes you are able to create very close metrics. Sometimes you have to improvise. Finally, if you have think about the change management, so think about how to well update that in case of changes. Yes, so you ended up, and that's my last slide. Actually, you end up with some sort of a risk map or heat map, as it's sketched here. So from knowing where are the hotspots, where are the weaknesses of the house, of our house, if you're going back to that analogy at the beginning, we may tackle those risks, manage them, or be prepared to mitigate them. We can prepare an action plan. We need to start probably our activities from the red points there on the maps, from the places which are the weakest and bear the most risks, or the more important risks. We may develop assurance or some sort of measuring, monitoring, reporting how that heat map or risk map looks over time. And importantly, prepare for incident management, because we will know which parts of the organization are prone to errors, to risks, which are risky. Okay, so that's probably enough for me, and I'm handing over to Laura, as she would like to share with you more about the incident management. And yeah, thank you very much. Stop sharing, maybe.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Marcin. I see some questions in the chat. We will get to questions at the end. So if you have pressing questions, just put them in the Q&A box. Great. Yeah, so now we are getting into the second part of this session. Coming back to the metaphor we started with, remember that emergency plan I mentioned? Well, that plan is your privacy breach management framework, and I will refer to it as a framework just for the sake of timing. To open this section, let's quickly define what we are responding to. What we are responding to is a privacy breach, of course. Under Section 112 of the Privacy Act 2020, privacy breach is any unauthorized or accidental access, disclosure, alteration, loss, or destruction of personal information. Situations where your agency can access information, even temporarily, are also privacy incidents. Now, let's move on to how to build your framework, shall we? I'm just trying to move my slide. Great. The framework is your agency's step-by-step guide. And it should actually outline the process to what to do when a privacy incident happens. It aligns the roles, responsibilities, and actions your team will follow if there is a breach. It could be anything from a lost file, which happens often, employee browsing, email sent to the wrong person, a full system breach. This framework lays out how to respond to that, to identify the incident, contain it, notify the right people, and prevent it from happening again. I'm going to go deep into this in a minute. But for now, I want to explain why do you need one. A strong framework helps you to do 4 key things, and you can see them at the top of the slide. The most important thing, prevent harm to individuals. Behind every privacy incident, as Marcin said, there is an individual who could be affected and suffer real harm. And when you do that, you preserve trust with your clients, your community, and the public. And that often means reducing potential reputational damage. In turn, you will be meeting your legal obligations, of course, under the Privacy Act, especially around breach notification. When you respond quickly and effectively, it helps you contain harm and in the long run reduces costs for your agency. So there is plenty of advantages to have a good framework, and it isn't just paperwork. is just turning your good intentions into a clear, structured response. And I'm sharing here some tips for everyone in the call, small, big agencies. I know there are many people from different agencies in the call. First tip is document your framework clearly and in writing. Because when something goes wrong, your team needs to know where to look and what to do. It has to be accessible to everyone and not buried in someone's inbox or saved on a desktop. And let's be honest, if you are the privacy officer and you are on leave, living your best life on holiday, which is exactly when these things happen, by the way, someone else needs to be able to pick it up and act. If you are not there, who is going to respond to the incident? So make it available to all staff and make sure people understand what to do when a privacy incident occurs. That means including the framework in an onboarding staff process. I always recommend this to everyone, especially to small agencies, big agencies, but make it part of your onboarding staff. Covering in privacy training and clearly outlining roles and responsibilities. The second tip, as you can see in my screen, is run tabletop exercises or bridge simulations. You don't need to overcomplicate it. Just walk through a scenario with your team. What would you do if this happened tomorrow? What would you do if you lose your laptop? What would you do if you sent an email to the wrong person? Use it as a chance to test your response, spot gaps, and build confidence. Now, how often you should do this? Well, depends on a few things. First, your agency size, the type of information you hold, as Marcin explained, sensitive or non sensitive information, the nature of your operations, for example. If you are a healthcare agency holding really sensitive information, you have to maybe test it more than a retail agency, because a retail agency, of course, handles less sensitive information. Consider whether there have been major changes in your organization, a new platform, vendor. The goal is to keep your framework updated and fit for purpose. And lastly, a reminder, and that's the last thing in my slide, is keep it up to date, right? Dusty framework makes reference to Privacy Act 1993 is not going to help you when things happen. Alrighty, so let's take a look at what your framework should include. And this can look a little bit overwhelming, and I'm seeing my slide, but it doesn't have to be. Whether you are in a large agency or a small team, these elements can absolutely be scaled to your context. And what matters the most is that the foundations are clear and the right people know what to do. Here is what I always recommend. Start by defining what a privacy breach is. Don't assume your staff just knows. You want to include this clearly in your training materials, ideally with real life examples that make sense in your environment. So people who copy privacy policies and especially breach management frameworks for another agency, it may not be fit for purpose, and maybe not effective for your agency. For example, someone emailing a document to the wrong person, as I say, or a staff member accessing client information without a legitimate business purpose. These are the kinds of everyday incidents people need to recognize. And as a privacy officer, yes, part of your role is to train your staff. One of your core roles is to help Kaimahi and everyone in the agency understand what a privacy incident looks like and what to do when one happens, of course. And just as important, and this is something more personal, create a culture where people feel safe escalating things, even if it was a mistake. My second point here is a clear response strategy. This part is all about logistics and includes the containing, assessing, notifying breaches that we will see. We will dive deeper into each of these in a minute. But for now, make sure that everything you have mapped out in your framework is actually supported by people who can do the work. It could look great, but if there is no people in your agency to sustain the framework, it won't be effective. The next one is define the roles and responsibilities, be specific. Who leads the response? Who handles IT? Who's managing media or legal risks when something happens? You don't want to be figuring this out in the middle of the incident. Let's say your agency experienced a cyber attack. Have a contact in your framework that you can easily call and contain it. Do you have a cybersecurity expert on call? Maybe you should also write down your insurer contact details. And if the breach, for example, compromises someone's physical safety, you want to involve your internal security team, even the police, and you want your Kaimahi to know what to do immediately. These are the kinds of questions your framework should clearly answer. Now, I have here underneath the roles and responsibilities of staff, another category, third-party providers. Don't forget third-party providers, please. This one is significant. Under Section 11 of the Privacy Act, even if a provider is processing personal information on your behalf, you are still responsible for that information. For example, suppose your agency uses a third-party provider for data storage. In that case, you need to ensure your contract includes a clause requiring them to notify you immediately if they have a privacy incident involving your information. And again, document it in your framework, make it part of your policy. That way you can control the response and meet your obligations, including reporting notifiable breaches. The last one, record keeping and metrics. I suggest to include this as well in your framework. Keep a simple log of what happened, what was done, what you learned. This will give you insights over time and help with continuous improvement, as we will see in a moment. And great. This is more substantive, want you to include in your framework. Many of us have seen this model before in one form or another. These are the 4 core steps of managing a privacy incident. You will want this clearly reflected in your framework. And I have added the bar across the bottom of this slide for a reason. It's there to remind us that the most important thing, your goal through every step of this process, if you find it a little bit chaotic, is to prevent harm to affected individuals. That's your goal. If you are unsure what to do, ask yourself, will this reduce the risk of harm? And that should guide your decisions. Now, I'm not going to go through each of these steps in full detail today, because that's not the point of the presentation. What I want to do is help you to build these steps into your framework, or check that the framework you already have aligns with the structure. So let's quickly run through each step. Of course, take immediate steps to limit the breach and stop any further compromise of personal information. Assess, you gather the facts, you understand what happened, what kind of information is involved, and who is affected. Then you assess the risk, especially the risk of serious harm. That's a huge part of this stage. Notify, inform the affected individuals and the Office of the Privacy Commissioner if there is serious harm and you have assessed it as likely to cause serious harm or has already caused serious harm, as required under Part 6 of the Privacy Act. Prevent, after the incident is contained and managed, think long-term. What actions can you take to prevent it from happening? Now, let's go into detail, and I'm very mindful of the time. Containment, and how you will include containment into your framework. The goal here is simple: limit the impact of the incident. And your framework, I recommend, should include examples of practical containment measures so staff know what immediate actions they can take without delay. For example, if personal information is emailed to the wrong person, contact the recipient, ask them to delete the email, and confirm once it's done. Disable access to share folders, lock a user account, or suspend access. All of these are examples of containment and can be written into the framework or listed in a quick reference guide. Also, include key questions to help guide containment decisions. This can be a checklist. Is the personal information still being shared? Who currently has access to it? And can we stop access or reduce the risk of harm? Make sure your framework also covers who to contact immediately, as I always say, and I include these under security measures. So important to include all of it in your framework. Now, we come to the assessment phase, which is one of the most important parts of your response. This is where a lot of the thinking and coordination happens. You will often need to work with internal stakeholders. And as Marcin explained, you need to identify what happened and how serious it is. So you need to engage with your internal stakeholders. Sometimes it's not quite straightforward. I'm not going to walk you through how to do a full breach assessment, but in line with the theme, which is the framework, I will talk about how to embed this step into your framework. One practical tool I always recommend is a privacy breach report form. It doesn't have to be fancy, just a simple Word doc, PDF, online form. And people can fill it out and send it to you, to a privacy officer. This form becomes the basis for your assessment as well, and it should include key questions like you see on the screen that you always need to ask when you are assessing a privacy breach. What personal information was involved? What steps have already been taken to reduce the harm? Were there any security measures in place and were they effective? You cannot see my image of the privacy breach report because it's pretty small, but I just create a mock-up privacy breach report of someone reporting a lost laptop. So that person should include when this happened and if the laptop was protected by password or was wiped remotely. So you have all of these information. You can also use this form as well to record your assessment of serious harm and your decision to notify the Office of the Privacy Commissioner or not. It's important to have a clear record of how you made that decision. So I really recommend it. And a pro tip that I include in my slide is always request a timeline of events. It saves you so much time. And once you report to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, you notify, you will have that timeline ready for them to assess the risk of harm. And shout out to my friends, Steph and Alex, who presented yesterday, and they explained how to assess breach in a very detailed manner. So I think the presentation is on YouTube already. So great. I recommend to watch it. And let's talk about notification and how you should include notification in your framework. Well, when a privacy breach creates a risk of serious harm to individuals, we know Part 6 of the privacy breach kicks in. The main reason we notify individuals is so they can protect themselves. That's the heart of it. So if personal information is, for example, accessed or stolen in a way that could lead to identity theft, the affected person needs to know quickly so they can take steps like contacting the police or even changing their driver's license or protecting their credit card. So notification is about transparency and respect. And one key thing that you should include in your framework is how to do it, how to notify the affected parties. It is not enough to say, hey, your information was lost, sorry. You must notify in line with Section 117 of the Privacy Act. And that includes everything set out under subsection 2. For example, informing people of the right to make a complaint to the Privacy Commissioner. And this matters because people affected by breaches are often in a position of vulnerability and they may not know they have the right or what support is available to them. So build this into your framework and make sure everyone, especially those on the front line, know what should be communicated. Don't leave it vague to reassurance or a generic script. I also recommend appendices of your framework with some pointers on notifications. That's pretty important. One thing that I really want to include here, privacy officers should own, or it's better if you are across notification under 117 subsection 2, just because you know how to notify and you have the expertise and you can guide people to notify if you need it. So it's my recommendation. Once you have assessed that a breach is likely to cause serious harm, your framework should trigger an immediate response. It's important that your staff understand that notifying the OPC is not optional when there is serious harm or likelihood of serious harm. It's a legal requirement under the Privacy Act. Under Section 114, you must notify the Privacy Commissioner as soon as practicable after becoming aware that a notifiable breach has occurred. So your framework should spell this out clearly, including the urgency of the response, the legal consequences under Section 212 for failing to notify. So people know that they need to escalate quickly to you when they recognize a privacy incident and is likely to cause serious harm or has caused serious harm. I have another recommendation here, a pro tip. It's also really helpful to assign ownership of the OPC notification process. And my recommendation is that the privacy officer should take ownership of this particular step internally. You should be the person notifying the OPC because you will liaise with the OPC. That gives you control, consistency, and accountability, and it ensures the notification is handled by the subject matter expert. And lastly, just to finish our presentation here, prevention. I love metrics. I think the privacy officer's best friend are metrics, just because that will give you a lot of insights into your privacy function, right? So start by setting up a privacy breach register. Again, it could be a basic Excel spreadsheet that works. Just make sure it doesn't contain personal information, please, and that it's password protected if needed. This register should include the basic details of each incident, what actions were taken, what lessons were learned, when the dates are really, really important. And don't forget to include near misses as well. I know we forget sometimes about near misses. Near misses are situations where a breach was avoided, like when someone sends an email to the wrong person, realizes and recalls before the email was opened by the recipient as a near miss. Near misses are valuable, and this is my pro tip as well, because they show you where things almost went wrong and where better processes or staff awareness might help. From this register, you can build a simple dashboard to identify patterns, what are the most common causes of incidents, which teams are seeing more issues, where might you need more targeted training. This business unit is really the source of incidents. We need training there. And I think that's the end of the presentation, and we can have 3 minutes for questions.
Yeah, I was covering some typed some answers in between.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I can touch the probably one which
Yep.
is on the top
Yep.
briefly. As you touched on, there are quite similar processes undertaken by privacy teams and IT cybersecurity teams, yet they are often separate teams and individuals working in parallel. How can you see these teams working more collaboratively and in the future to reduce overheads? Well, I couldn't subscribe more to that, yeah, to be honest. How to do it? Well, depends on the organization, depends on whether it's more hierarchical or more based on maybe more closer interactions or less structured. It's probably easier on those less structured because those people really have very similar risk. There is a different way of thinking about risks slightly with security and privacy. That cybersecurity needs that insights on what is privacy harm, but also there might be privacy risks that are not security risks. For example, with data transfers. Data transfer is purely legal things with the data travels across the border, and that can trigger some privacy obligations that can be different or some completely independent from security risks, because from security perspective, whether we have a data center here or in Melbourne, maybe it may be actually very similar. The risks might be the same. So those people have to talk and have to work together, and it's good, for example, to assess the impact assessment by members of both teams, yeah, and sometimes information management is involved in that. So all those ways of actually of creating an environment in which those people sit together on the same problem and assessing the similar risk is well, highly encouraged, and I think it's a good idea because there is really a lot of redundancy and a lot of things as well. Those people can learn from one another. Well, privacy specialists can learn from security specialists a lot about the access control systems, because they cover also privacy as well, and so on. So, well, I hope that I answered, but I cannot give you the precise answer how to do it. But that should the organization has to implement processes and management decisions in which actually have somehow make those people put together, speak one another, and do those processes which actually involve both parties and somehow make them to communicate if they don't want to communicate by themselves. But I think they should want to do it by themselves.
Thank you, Marcin. I think we have run out of time. We are sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Sorry, I took the
No, thank you so much. Thank you.
the last time. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us. Have a wonderful day.